had no.
I ain't done that shit, but I just witnessed you guys. I was like, bro, there's some other shit, bro. Before I start this video, I'd like to actually promote a Discord server that I'm a part of. It's for music discussion. It's quite small. It's a teeny but very kind community of people who are passionate about music. I tend to pick up a lot of recommendations here because there's a community of people with varying tastes in music. And if you want to join, just feel free to click the link. Bring some enthusiasm and a willingness to talk with others, which is pretty much how this whole online thing works. There's dust on my laptop. Ah, March. What a big month. This was very hard to summarize. I'd like to disclaim that there's a lot of albums you might not see me present my opinion on in this video, and that's probably because I'm either saving them for next month's roundup, or I'm actually reviewing it in its own video, or just haven't heard it. I'm not omnipresent.
Please don't never tell on me, baby. Never tell. That mean don't call 12 on me, baby.
It's neat to finally see people admit that Titty Boy could always spit pretty good, also doing that over beats that bump as hard as a knocked funny bone. Kendrick raps like a drunkard in 3/4 time, Ariana continues her pursuit for hip-hop cred, and 2 Chainz himself drops an unexpectedly fiscally conservative confession about disliking taxes. It's a weird time, kind of fun, and yet somehow not one I'm urgent to return to. A bit like a party that isn't weird in the infectiously bizarre way, more like you're just not too keen on the crowd and you might head off to avoid any further clashes of personality. I'm all for this new wave of club music being shattered and then rebuilt with the pieces. It sounds brave, it sounds fierce, and my favourite kind is the sort that manages to be extremely danceable in the process. This does have a few abstract, screeching, stuttering vignettes that sound like snippets from the soundtrack to a utopian thriller film, but waiting through these moments as a build-up is what makes the rhythmic, catchy moments all the more satisfying with impact. I'd actually say the album as a whole, while unpredictable and jarring in flow, is excelente. Throat singing and noise rock. I'm in, bro. And somehow, noisy bedroom pop still hasn't escaped my heart, at least not completely. I'm trying to lure it out. This Ashley 9 Lives album is actually produced very well for something that embraces lo-fi quality, written to sound like the youthful anthems in a coming-of-age film, and any chorus that gets loud and distorted actually makes you want to ear punch. I feel as if sincerity and the lo-fi fuzz is what prevents this album from sounding like a Ford Fiesta commercial. Yeah, no, this kinda rocks.
May I share the sandwiches there are looking for the spotted mustard?
The first time I heard this, I assumed it was just on some Beefheart shit. The band members barely play in time. It's like a garage rock album recorded and produced with everybody wearing AirPods because, oh god, oh fuck, it's like they can't hear us. As it went on, I sort of realized that there's a wonder to that. It's actually very cathartic and fun to hear a band be so courageous, with just how angular and clashing their songwriting is, and it makes the riffs that taste like bitter melon and wry, blunt lyrics all the more appreciable. Duke of Bilgewater is some fine dance punk.
Money, money, my motto, money machine, money, cell phone ring, mulatto models making money, money making me, never breaking me, big.
Truthfully, it's the beats and flows that keep this one entertaining. Blue attempts to recapture the spirit of old school West Coast hip hop, but I don't know, nothing really feels fresh. I don't want to seem dismissive of his storytelling, but I don't really end up coming to this one for a yarn, more just a series of cool sounding flexes of technical skill. The more off-kilter, the better, I find. Also, I don't know if you realize, there are some things you don't have to recapture from the old times. Yes, I'm talking about the homophobia.
Feel like you, not feel like you, act like nothing's real like you.
For the record, I think that Bring Me the Horizon's previous material is shockingly good for something so remembered as being subpar, if not worse. I heard that them nearing towards electropop recently, with the inclusion of absolute nu metal and hardcore icon Grimes, made this one of their most tolerable and fun albums in a while, so I had some optimism. A shame that none of that optimism was fulfilled though. This is pretty fucking awful.
People are having fun. Everyone is looking for something or someone.
There's this beautiful sense of preservation of the past that goes on here. This album really is an earnest tribute to DJ Sharufi, revived by Miriam Minerva, with hypnagogic production feeling like a varnish that protects the sacred synthesizers and rigid patterned grooves like lamination. It's an affirming time, at least in spirit, although it does become a little bit passive over the course of the release. You can do the hot potato dance to it though, so that's pretty neat. The Beatles' psychedelic era enhanced, I guess, sprouting with clown flower badges and those red spotted mushrooms. I want to ask how something like this managed to be so horrendously boring, but it actually checks out, really. As one of the Dap Kings, you'd expect that Koshimir would have a lot of special experience and influence under his belt, in his holster, and slouching in his back pockets like spare receipts. I think this is a very engaging release if it's a bit cold on your side of the world and you suddenly need to feel like you're trudging through a humid jungle for about 40 minutes.
We'll turn to life tonight.
For an album with the intention of feeling like a momentous occasion, it sure does feel like a comfy stargazing session, only to realize that the clouds are blocking your view. Also, I'm pretty sure Turn the Light came from that last Casey Musgraves album. It must have.
How do you stop all the pain, huh? I used to hear a voice when I was praying, but nowadays I don't even want to be saved.
There's a weird common factor with conscious hip-hop artists who have a lot of brain but none of the soul. I can hear and agree with your ideas, but musically I just don't feel it, bro. It's like I'm staring at a mural that's just spelling out the message instead of portraying it in a manner that makes me feel it deeply. It's also weird that an album so tiring ends up having its long 12-minute track being the best one. No, I still don't really know what they're saying. I mean, I would like to, but for the time being, hearing such haphazard flows over haphazard beats is an absolute jam. Makes it feel like a finger swishing around their brains a little bit, very calmly. Although it hails from a completely different culture and influence, this album might have similar energy to Alicia Crampton's self-titled from last year, which I only liked a little bit. Only a little bit. A lot of rapid flooding of sounds that tessellate into addictive patterns, except here, it makes me want to rapidly move my legs like a footwork competition. Not that I could, I just feel obliged to do it. For a band that seems to have absolutely everything in order for a noisy, screechy hardcore album nailed, something feels so lethargic about this one. It's like it wants to mosh and scream, but it just ate a really big meal. This might be the dumbest technical death metal album I've ever heard. I'm pretty sure there are guitarists sloppily playing over each other at points. A flamenco guitarist makes their way into the gang. It's like the prog mafia, this is. It's also ridiculously fun. Like, honestly, fun. I thought I was over 2000s indie rock, but then Father Electricity from the Bloom Punch label showed up to the potluck with cleanly written songs for dinner. Even in moments when this sounds a little too close to that era to be truly original, the songs are just like really good anyways, that it doesn't always matter. There was actually a moment where I got this neat nostalgia rush because it sounded like Blondie. There are always these wonderful enchanting synthesizer melodies that soar above tracks like Winter of the Time and especially Zoe. It's a confident album, probably what makes it shine more than most recaptures of this particular sound. This is warm. It's very warm. I think eventually I just learned to appreciate this album for what it is. I was ready to call it the Aim in Dune's Freedom of this year, in that it's tepidly underwhelming with only one excellent single on it, but just before recording this I returned to it, and I really began to feel the homely connection through Roberto Langi's soft-spoken voice, cultural influences, and the warm fleeting instrumentation that comes in brief waves. This album finds its spectral power in subtlety, on the search for clarity like a walk through the community of your upbringing. Dreadful dissonance to give you that lost in the forest with something coming after you feeling. It's very effective. I wish I enjoyed this a lot more, but for how eclectic it is, it just seems to be a laundry pile of ideas in the form of tracks too brief to give me chills. Remember when I gave Ascendancy an 8 a few years ago? Wasn't that a lovely time? Super 90 is really what happens when a band succumbs to the pits of making absolutely boring and dime a dozen gent. Then they brought in gospel choir harmonies on one of the later tracks and I thought, fuck this.
Worry about who it is now. Don't worry about if we got kids now.
You don't have to reinvent the landscape of contemporary R&B, you just have to do it really well. Kalani's vocal harmonies make these choruses pop, with the kind of charisma that makes me glad I gave this a shot, even if overall I don't really remember how any of the songs sound. I think it's just how the meandering melody writing tends to be on a lot of R&B records. It's like the singing is trickling with very fancy vocal trills, and so many of them that I lose track of what part of the song is supposed to stick in my head. Thankfully, this continues to hint at the possibility of Kalani dropping something astounding in the future. The near spoken word verse at the end of Butterfly is wonderful. I distinctly remember Kokoroko from the We Out Here compilation last year, although I can't say that the low energy Afro jazz on this EP had me as captivated. It's certainly cruisy, but I'm not totally interested in cruisy. Unrelated, but I actually hate sunbathing. Gives me the chills, the sense of something larger than life without directly pointing at it, but also the inspiration to keep moving until you see it. I love music that radiates this feeling. Mount Kimby, Fever Ray, FKA Twigs, same energy. There's a good chance I might return to this one and review it in its own video. Outside a house? I've never been there. Laurel Halo's soundplay is always chilling and otherworldly. It's neat to hear her do more of the house mix thing. I can confirm that it's good, although a little bit disjointed, but still with plenty of neat events that are strung together like a bead necklace in dystopian colours. Yes, it's an album from Lena Raine, which is very wholesome and cool, but all I could really think about when listening to these instrumentals was Milo rapping over them.
Get litty, get gritty, Rick Sanchez, get swifty.
Oh, for fuck. It's brutal when you start it up, and then it stays brutal, and only brutal, and doesn't stop being brutal, to the point where it's no longer brutal. It's not very dynamic is what I'm saying. This is like what happens when you have brutality, but also the willingness to not do the same thing over and over. Dizzying rhythms are the usual for mathcore, but this just has a bit of playful bounce to it. Parts of this are what I wish the new Health album had become. I'm not too big on the dreamier sections, more so the crunchy, noisy, scathing songs with scowls and thick walls of sound to get amongst. So good at times, even if it doesn't compile into a massively cohesive record, but that's no matter when there's a banging cover of Suicide's Ghost Rider on this one as well. For a name as cute as Onion Knight, you should expect cute music, and if you expect cute music, that's exactly what you get. Listen to it in a quiet room, it's genuinely very reassuring. The thrash band are back to graze my skin. To be honest, this album is the band's best so far, feeling the most varied in style, but also generally finding that balance between playfulness and really going as hard as they can, which does the absurd but very perceptive lyrics justice, as they riff away into the blazing horizon. And blazing indeed. In previous years, I found that their approach was a little bit too much tomfoolery. This time I can stomp my foot on the carpet while wearing my clown nose. It's such an engaging concept really, stringing together foreign transmissions and various contextless field recordings to create a new story. I don't think that this is one of the best I've heard, but it's fascinating nonetheless. I'm grooving, I'm really, really grooving, I'm moving, I put my ass into it. It's really groovy, that's what I'm trying to say. There's very little needed to be said about how uninteresting release this was from one of the most iconic avant-garde rock groups out there. I remember saying that Year of the Dog was a great single last month. It's just a little bit sad that the rest just wallows in its own wankery of feedback and distortion. At one point I even just forgot there were lyrics on this thing. How much do I know about Persian classical music? None. Zilch, nada, antimatter. This is an unfortunate gap in my knowledge considering that Scattered Memories is a genuinely astounding album to me. Using that instrumental palette, it manages to still instill me this feeling of losing touch with distant memory, which is a running theme in a lot of what I've been reviewing this year. But maybe that's just a common thing that we think about in reference to the decade coming to an end. Maybe I'm just too demanding really. All this album had to do was offer catchy synthesizer pop songs, and it did, and yet I'm still not satisfied. What separates Sigrid from the rest of the crowd? I'm trying to find little details that'll help me figure that out, but in the time I spend doing that, I could be listening to Kimbra instead. Breathtaking recordings from a very well-accomplished musician. You heard a slow dive? Rings a bell. This truly captures the spirit of its cover art, incorporating soothing field recordings and building something special with the raw essence of that moment in time. For how often Soin sound like they copied the math homework of Opeth and still got the answers wrong, the first half of this album has genuinely meaty riffs and anthemic alt-rock choruses. They're not really anything new. Shit, they're not even that progressive, but they sound nice. And then the second half just sinks into a soppy pool of subpar rock ballads, and then I ponder, why? Why do people keep doing this to their albums? Has it really been 21 years? This is how you make a comeback, really. Instead of harking back to the old days of industrial, embrace the new, and make such a racket that you hammer your message into the surface you're aiming at.
Accelerate inside.
It's been nearly a decade since these New Puritans dropped Hidden, a phenomenal industrial post-punk release that was so deadpan about how blasphemous it felt, I was almost convinced I was being inducted into a cult. Nevertheless, Inside the Rose expands the instrumental palette with very luscious sounding string arrangements, but there's something stopping it really. Maybe it just sounds a bit two-dimensional with this new sound. Nothing sounds bad, it just doesn't carry the impact that their previous albums did with such cracking percussion and ghastly attitude. This one's a bit of a theatre piece. Oh, that's it. Melodrama. How can you revive Maiden and Priest era heavy metal in 2019 and make the production sound worse? Genuine question. That's an achievement. It's the worst thing I've heard this year so far. I should have been warned when I saw that this cover looked like an RPG Maker boss fight, and I didn't really know how to articulate the solos on this thing, but they're like the musical equivalent of cold spaghetti. I've heard that there's some kind of mythology inspiration behind this album. If there is, I really don't care for it. I thought the music itself was pretty mid. The boy West Coast. Woo! They're pretty alright. I like the sound, the melody writing's pretty sweet, and it reminds me of this crazy big shore with huge fuck off waves I went to in the summer. The music just doesn't seem to have much of a distinct personality track to track.
As we to speak, or stay for the week.
There's a strange art to sound collage, repurposing established sound for a new context, and well-spoken word excerpts over particular music passages makes this quite a unique listen, and although each track is meant to support the next, the brevity of each one and how distinct they are leaves you as a listener trying to string them together, and albums like these tend to intrigue me the most. There is a very touching intimacy to this album that seems to make it work as a string of life experiences being retold.
Face dried up from all of the tears I cried up.
I've had a soft spot for Chief Keef, even if I don't really end up liking his projects overall, but because Zaytoven's at the control panel, I believe that the production's a lot shinier and more glamorous. It's very nice, the presentation's wonderful. I just wish the EP overall wasn't just another set of tracks that I'll probably forget a month from now. Here's the motherfucking best albums of March 2019. March was a fantastic month, honestly. When I reflect on what I heard, I just think of highlights and highlights and highlights, even though the Gesaffelstein album came out, but we forget about that pretty quickly, don't we? And Juice WRLD. Wow. Weezer's Black album as well. But you know what? I had to think of those. These 6 albums... Sorry, what the Okay, I'm gonna call you out, boy. The notification just appeared on my phone. I'ma whoop your ass. I'ma whoop your ass. These 6 albums are fantastic, and even though I do a little build up with every monthly roundup where I sort of count down to my best album of the month, the order doesn't matter. This is very arbitrary. I just like to do a build up sort of thing. These are all fantastic albums, and I hope that you find some enjoyment out of them as much as I did. So I'm going to start with my first pick, which is NYOS's Now, a Finnish math rock band that created this towering, inspiring, gigantic sounding rock album with fierce riffs, song structures that repeat and repeat and repeat and continue to build and create this sense of height, and that's what really makes this special. I described it in my review as songs to build ladders to the sky to, and that checks out. My second pick would be the very fun, cute, quirky Sir Babygirl album Crush on Me, which by the way she did see. I'm very thankful for that. But this is a fantastic pop album. It's got some of my favourite songs of the year. Each one has its own distinct personality, even if the track listing is very brief, and a lot of them are just reprises of previous songs. Sir Babygirl has fantastic vocal performances to give. She's a powerhouse of a singer. Even though the album is very clearly dripping with this homemade aesthetic, I think it actually adds a lot of blaring and brave personality to the record. My third pick, you might have heard of this one, Little Simz, Grey Area. Yeah, no, this is a fantastic one. It's bold, it's sharp, it's clever, it's catchy, it's varied. The album has a lot of variety to it, and you'll always remember each track after you hear it. I always remember Boss as the one that is really outrageous and bass-driven and bouncy, and I always remember 101 FM as the very earnest callback to classic UK hip-hop and grime. I always remember Sherbet Sunshine as the very confessional breakup track. My third pick would be AVEY's Cows on Hourglass Pond. AVEY is a member of the renowned experimental collective Animal Collective, the collective of animals. Or I've never really been too hot on the members' solo releases with the exception of Deacon. It always seemed like they had the sound play nailed down, but they never really knew what to do with it, aside from make very meandering, directionless pieces that sort of just, I don't know, I just wallow in them, and I didn't really get that much. And AVEY's previous album, Eucalyptus, was a pretty good demonstration of that, because it had that sound play, it had this very aquatic, psychedelic folk sound to it, but considering its length, it didn't really manage to cap on that very well. It was a bit overlong, lethargic, tedious. In comparison, Cows on Hourglass Pond must have been the moment where he said, I've got great sounds, but what do I do with them? And he probably thought, let's write some actual songs. Better late than never, because this is probably one of my favourite things I've heard this year. My number 2 pick for this month is a really cleansing compilation of not new material, but it's a lovely portfolio of Japanese ambient, environmental and new age music from 1980 to 1990. KANKYO ONGAKU. I think it's a wonderful, accessible starter's guide to Japanese electronic music. And my favourite album of the month is actually 6 albums in one, Everywhere at the End of Time. It's by Leland Kirby under the name The Caretaker. It's his final project under that name, and it's absolutely phenomenal. I think what makes this so effective is The Caretaker's very honest and undiluted approach to the topic of memory, and especially memory loss. This is a concept album about the effects of onset dementia. It's a very vivid experience, and I really think to get the most out of this listen, you should go into it knowing the concept, but also not really knowing how that concept's going to play out. It's one of the most frightening and devastating and saddening releases I've ever laid my ears on. Just full stop. And now it's time to quickly scroll through my top 25 favourite songs. I'm stuttering so much. My 25 favourite songs of March 2019. I'll do what I did before, I'll do a nice countdown, so we'll eventually arrive at what I deem to be the best song of that month. Starting off with an incredible soundscape from the new Simon Scott album, Grace. The very sweet and catchy song by Drain Puppet, As Much. Number 23, I want to shout out the new S. Reedy single, The Ballad of a Bitter Hater, where the singing hook actually improves tenfold. That was actually one of my gripes with the new EP that he dropped last year. Number 22, my favourite song from the new Father Electricity album, Zoe, or The Things That I Believe. This one actually gave me quite the nostalgia rush, as it reminded me very heavily of Blondie. Number 21, good pal Liebers dropped 2 incredible singles called Razzmatazz and Chip Damage. The dude makes incredible chiptune music. He really seems to understand the composition that goes behind that. Chip Damage is my favourite of the 2. It's the most frantic, it's the most urgent, it sounds like a boss fight theme in a retro indie game of sorts. Number 20 is the Rosalia J Balvin El Guincho song Con Altura. Reggaeton tends to get a bad rep, and even though it's the same beat over and over again, to me it's always been, okay, first off, it's a really good beat, but it's also just about the way that the artists make that beat worth listening to, what they do over the beat. And Rosalia has, as we all know, has a fantastic voice, but also J Balvin's performances here have a lot of charisma. Con Altura is catchy and sensual, it's very good. Number 19, Feels by Kalani. Number 18, one of the coolest dance punk tracks I heard last month, as I mentioned before, Duke of Bilgewater by Bilge Pump. Number 17, Uncomfortably Numb by American Football. Number 16, my favourite track from the exhilarating and dilapidated new album from Show Me the Body called Madonna Rocket. Number 15, Solange with Almeda featuring Playboy Carti. Number 14, Gloria by Tierra, a single that I was sort of expecting to end abruptly a minute in. Number 13, a fantastic drum and bass track with Jinx is Bad in the Area. Number 12, Stella Donnelly's Lunch. Number 11, Billy Woods and Kenny Segal with Red Dust. And at number 10, Spelling's Real Fun, the respective albums that the last 3 tracks I just named belong to. I am in the process of writing and recording reviews for those albums soon, so be on the lookout for that, especially with that Billy Woods and Kenny Segal album, because there's no way I'm going to dissect that immediately. At number 9, a really dark single with the great Dictators By the Throat featuring Jamie Stewart from Shoo Shoo. At number 8, it's Boss by Little Simz. Even though that was a single that came out last year, I didn't hear it until this year. It counts, it really does. Otherwise I just put Offense instead, but Boss is my favorite track from that thing. Stop fucking with my heart! Number 7, The Novembers cover of the Suicide song, Ghost Rider. Number 6, NYOS with Urgence. Number 5, my favorite song from the new La Dispute album, Fulton Street 3. There's no part 3. I meant Fulton Street 2, sorry. Number 4, The Japanese House with You Seemed So Happy. A song so good to me that I ended up spending like at least 70% of my review of that album just talking about that one track. Not that it's like a mind-blowing song, but it's just a really comforting, reassuring one. But my third favorite track of the month would be Straight Shot by Quelle. Straight Shot is almost like a rap ballad with very insightful lyrics, just beautiful, beautiful poetry spat by all the guest features, even including James Acaster's feature, which I'll talk about later on, but just James Acaster on a hip-hop track, come on. Number 2, Cheerleader by Sir Babygirl. And number 1, my song of the month, Eternal by Holly Herndon. That new album from Holly Herndon is now my most anticipated of the year. I try not to anticipate too much, but you know, there are those artists that come out with amazing singles. That happened with Julia Holter last year, and we all know how that ended up. So maybe Holly Herndon will be the one. You never know. Listen, I really wanted to include No Name Song 32 on that one, but you know, I'll have to save that for April. So Liam Hopkins, you're off the hook for now. But I'm